Welcome to the Other Duties as Assigned podcast. I am Kasey, joined by the one and only head of the Sport Management Department at Cortland, Dr. Ryan Vooris, for our first ever episode. Dr. Vooris, you are the first guest. Do you feel some pressure?
Pressure is a privilege, Kasey. I believe that's Billie Jean King said that, so I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So we're getting this podcast started for the Sport Management Department. My hope is to kind of provide some advice from a student perspective, from an alumni perspective, from a professor perspective, all of it. Yesterday was your first day of class. This week, I guess we could say, it was the first day of classes. We're kind of still going through a pandemic, hopefully transitioning out of it at some point here close in the future. But, being a student throughout the pandemic has been hard. Transitioning back to in-person classes. I remember this past fall semester, I took my first physical paper test since the start of the pandemic, and it wasn't easy. So I know from the student side of things, it hasn't always been the best. But what's it been like for you, for the professors?
That's a good question, Kasey, because I think from from a faculty perspective, it's been a lot like it has probably for a lot of other workers. You don't know if your job's going to be open that day, or if you're going to get an email that we're shut down or there's a new testing procedure. I think, probably for the faculty, it's been a lot like the student experience in that there's just a lot of uncertainty. You don't know what the testing procedures are. You don't know where the cases are, what's the mask procedure in this building versus another building versus, when you're outside, and you don't ever want anyone to feel uncomfortable. So yeah, I would say the big thing is just the uncertainty, and I really do think, probably a lot like from the student perspective, it has worn on us. We're going on 2 years of this thing now, and I think we're all excited that at some point it'll be over, and I think being on firmer ground is what we're all looking forward to.
And as the department head, it kind of occurred to me last week, do you think there would ever be a class created, sport and COVID?
Sport and COVID. I don't know. I've certainly, anything's possible, So one of the things that obviously a lot of faculty members do is academic research. And we publish in academic journals like the Journal of Sport Management or the Journal of Applied Management. A number of those research journals have done special issues on COVID and how COVID has affected, media rights. ESPN was essentially shut down for months and months, and they had to go into their library and show old stuff. So I think it's certainly a possibility. Any class that has to do with event management or facility management is going to have discussions about pandemics, infectious diseases, dealing with unexpected shutdowns, because it's just going to be a reality. It's going to be a lived experience for, the next two generations of sports fans and people that participate in sports. So I could certainly see it being a part of facility management, event management. Hopefully we don't have to deal with anything on the size of COVID again, but I could certainly see, disease is a reality of life.
With the semester starting up this week, I guess my piece of advice to all the students would be to enjoy a close to normal school year. COVID hit my sophomore year, so I never really got a normal year after my freshman year, but my mentality going into it, and I know the other seniors in my class, just saying make the best of it, enjoy it, because 5 months from now we're going to be walking the stage and be like, wow, I wish I took in strategic management a little bit more and enjoyed it, even though we're working through a pandemic and sitting outside being bothered by bugs. But yeah, what's kind of your advice to the students going through this right now?
So mine is pretty. It's a wide array, because I think, number one, you got to acknowledge how sad and upsetting it is, right? I was just talking to Professor Brady, our internship coordinator. When your class graduates, we will not have any students who remember Cortland before COVID, who remember college before COVID once your class is gone, because every class have been affected by it and will never have had a normal year. At the same time, you can't let that frustration dominate your life. We're in sports. Sports is about dealing with disappointment and dealing with not winning the championship, not making the postseason, not having success. At the same time, I think you have to allow that to build character, right? You have to allow that to build resiliency, and you have to say, okay, this can either frustrate me or it can allow me to build character and resilience, and hey, if I can get through this, I can get through anything in the rest of my life. If I can live through a pandemic, if I can graduate college in a pandemic, hopefully nothing of that same scale will ever bother you to the same degree, right? So that's what I would hope most students would say, is say, okay, yes, I know it's frustrating, and I know the experience was not a normal college experience, but I can allow that to I can allow that to build my character. You're not the first generation to go through tons and tons of struggles. And I hope we look back in 25 to 30 years and we say, hey, they weren't the COVID generation, they were the resilient generation. They grew up very quickly because they had to, but that they had a lot of character because of it.
And again, we're speaking with Dr. Ryan Vooris, the head of the Sport Management Department, here on the first ever episode of Other Duties as Assigned. Let's switch gears really quick here. Do some quick fire questions at you. What was the last book you read?
That's a good question. So I'm reading, I just finished The Midnight Library, which is a great book. And then pretty soon we'll be starting Call an Audible by Darren K. Roberts, one of my favorite authors, writers, social media followers. I would make sure you check out that book, Call an Audible, especially for sport management majors.
I completely support that recommendation. Who do you admire most in the sport world?
Oh, that's a good question. Billy Beane. I read Moneyball about 20 years ago, and it had a huge influence on my perspective. I have a lot of admiration for Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA. That's a hard job to do, to be a commissioner of professional sport. They're generally the most unpopular people in their sport, but yet Adam Silver has somehow still kept a good relationship with the players' union, a good relationship with the media, a good relationship with the players themselves, and we don't always see that coming out of the commissioner office in the professional league. So I would say as a leader, I really admire his perspective. And then, I guess outside of sports, I've always been a bit of a Barack Obama fan. So.
And what has been the most impactful lesson you've learned from your students during your time as a professor?
Lesson from my students? That is an excellent question that I don't have an immediate answer for. I probably have a great one in about an hour when I think about it. I would say, the theme that, and you've told me this before, and a lot of other students have told me this before, is the students that seem to be most happy are the ones who are most involved. They get involved with the athletics department, they're involved with the sport management club, they're doing other things besides just the classwork, and they're checking the different boxes that, filled up their resume, that fill up their soul, so to speak. And they get fulfillment through multiple different things. So I would say that's the biggest lesson that I think about for my students is, they're involved in a lot of different things. And it reminds me, too, that, your personality and your strengths don't have to be in one specific area. It can be in multiple areas.
Right. Definitely. There's no better place than Cortland to provide students with those extra opportunities. But Dr. Vooris, I want to thank you for being the first ever guest.
You're welcome.
On our podcast here in the Sport Management Department. So I'm excited to get this thing rolling.